Hello and welcome back. I do hope that, as always, that this video finds you in good health and high spirits and about as happy as anybody has any business being. This is the first installment of a series of videos on the Exodus. It's an event that really happened, although I didn't discover this until almost 20 years ago. Up until that time, I thought it was just a story, as I thought the Bible was all just contrived fiction. But then certain inspired thoughts came along, and this mind that really doesn't belong to me, but that I do get to use from time to time, convinced me otherwise, that it was a real event. And it was an outgrowth of the conspiracy mentioned in Part 9. In fact, its impact covered most of the rest of the Bible up until the so-called New Testament. In fact, the Bible is one continuum without any breaks, and we'll find that the Jehovah's are preoccupied with repairing the damage done by the Exodus, which was a natural, or well, maybe an unnatural, consequence of the original conspiracy and its outcome. You will be amazed, as I was, about how little you really know about the Bible in general, but the Exodus in particular. It's not the happy sojourn of a liberated people going on their way to a promised land flowing with milk and honey. It is anything but that. And I would mention a new idea that came to me concerning the Bible itself. Of course, it is reputed to be the best-selling book of all time, and small wonder, because it started getting printed back in the late 16th century with, or was it the 15th? The late 15th century, with Gutenberg's cool new printing press. So it had a jump on all later, more contemporary bestsellers. But I think I would dispute the fact that it's the best-selling book, more like the best-selling luggage. Because it seems like the millions and millions of people who own them sometimes flash them around, but for the most part carry them around, don't seem to be doing very much in the line of reading the damn thing. That's those black characters on the white background. I think the closest most of the faithful come to that point is in following a prescribed reading list, which parts of the Bible to read on which days of the year, and there's one for every day of the year. Of course, they're going to be carefully selected so as not to give away too much and to just propel the dogma. One thing you'll never see is the first 8 verses of Genesis 6. But anyway, the truth is that the Exodus was a reign of terror commanded by a mentally unbalanced, paranoid, psychopathic, unstable lunatic and mass murderer. And I'm speaking of Jehovah Yahweh. Now, to clarify a point, the the Bible is pretty liberally salted with Jehovah's, so it should be clear that Jehovah is not a name, it's a title of authority. Jehovah, Lord, what have you. And that when he traveled to Midian, present-day Iraq, where Joseph was tending the flocks of his father-in-law, Jethro, the Jehovah, Yahweh, tried to coerce him into joining up with his brother Aaron and going to Egypt with the message that the Lord God of Israel says, "Let my people go." Well, you don't get too far into the book where you get this the very clear impression that even Yahweh doesn't want any part of this. And of course, Moses tries to excuse his way out of it. Well, I'm not good with words, and I'm not good with people, and why don't you get somebody else? And there is one point where the mind changer happens, and this is when the anger of the Lord waxed hot. And Moses decides, well, maybe a little change of scenery won't hurt, so we'll meet up with good old Aaron, and we'll travel to Egypt because, you know, I don't think I'm wanted for murder anymore. Excuse me. So they did it, and in Exodus 5, verse 1, and afterward Moses and Aaron went in and told Pharaoh, "Thus saith the Lord God of Israel, let my people go, that they may hold a feast unto me in the wilderness." Well, in Exodus 32, when Moses goes up to the mountain to get the law, verse 7, beginning verse 7, and through to 17, we read, "And the Lord said to Moses, unto Moses, Go, get thee down, for thy people, which thou broughtest out of the land of Egypt, have corrupted themselves." Now, this brings to mind the familiar scene of the loving mother who has a darling little boy until he misbehaves, and then she drags him out into the living room and says to her husband, "Look what your son did." The old proverbial hot potato. Now, Moses was a lackey. He was a stooge. Just read it. But in the opening days, he did have a little bit of clout. And we see this in, well, first time, in Exodus 32, because after Yahweh makes this declaration, and he is pissed. Make no mistake about it. He hates these goddamn people. He doesn't want to be there. He's under orders. He doesn't dare take the action that he wants to, which is to remove them from the face of the earth. He wants to burn these little guys. Now therefore let me alone, that my wrath may wax hot against them, and that I may consume them. And I will make of thee a great nation, he tells Moses. Well, Moses isn't having any because, like I say, he's still got a little more mojo than he ends up with later on. And he says, where should the Egyptians speak and say, for mischief did he bring them out, to slay them in the mountains, and to consume them from the face of the earth? And here is probably one of the most remarkable statements in the whole Bible. Turn from thy fierce wrath and repent of this evil against thy people. This is God repenting of evil? And then Moses goes on with the you promised part. Remember Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, thy servants, to whom thou swearest by thine own self, and saidst unto them, I will multiply your seed as the stars of heaven, and all this land I have spoken of I will give you unto your seed, and they shall inherit it forever. Well, doing a quick fast forward to the end of this reign of terror, we find out that the land of milk and honey really isn't such a cool place after all. And it turns out to be Canaan, the very same place they started from. And they're not there very often when, or for very long, when along comes the Assyrians and the Babylonians and the Hittites and Alexander the Great and the Romans, and well, you get the idea. Well, verse 14, and the Lord repented of the evil he thought to do to his people. And Moses turned and went down from the mount, and the two tables of the testimony were in his hand. The tables were written on both sides, and on one side and on the other were they written. So, and we get the idea that it was written on both sides. And the tables were the work of God. Really? And the writing was the writing of God graven upon the tables. Well, so far we don't see much of a God here. And when Joshua heard the noise of the people as they shouted, he said unto Moses, there is noise of war in the camp. People were kind of pissed too, I guess. And as far as the happy sojourn of a liberated people, let's turn to Exodus 14, verse 10. And when Pharaoh drew nigh, the children of Israel lifted up their eyes, and behold, the Egyptians marched after them. And they were sore afraid, and the children of Israel cried out unto the Lord. And they said unto Moses, because there were no graves in Egypt, hast thou taken us away to die in the wilderness? Wherefore hast thou dealt thus with us, to carry us forth out of Egypt? In other words, what the hell is this all about? Is this not the word that we did tell thee in Egypt, saying, let us alone, that we may serve the Egyptians? For it had been better for us to serve the Egyptians than that we should die in the wilderness. And Moses said to the people, fear ye not, stand still, and see the salvation of the Lord, which he will shew you today. For the Egyptians, whom you have seen today, ye shall see them again no more forever. Well, that's not quite true. Oh, and in passing, we'll just mention the second instance of Moses standing up to the Pharaoh, and this is in the very next chapter, Exodus 33, where the Lord tells Moses, well, look, you go on ahead. I won't go with you because this is a stiff-necked people, and I might just consume them in the hour. So we see he has a remarkable talent for holding grudges. He's still smarting over the first episode in 32. But I will send angels. Now, angels are actually the foot soldiers or the rank and file of the lords, which are real people, by the way. Moses says, in other words, so many words, he says, if you don't go with us, we're not going. So now, again, this mighty Jehovah, Yahweh, is flummoxed a second time. And this is what the book of Leviticus is all about. Because he issues precise instructions as to what, as to how the tabernacle of the congregation is to be so painstakingly and so precisely built by Bezalel, who must have really had a pretty hard time with that himself, because, I mean, it was right down to every stitch. What was the tabernacle of the congregation? It was a portable palace. Because along the way, the people would be trekking along, going who knows where. But then when the Jehovah showed up, and he would come and go. Well, when he showed up, why, they pitched a camp and set up this portable palace for him to live in. And now we have not only the dissatisfaction, the fear and anger of the people, now we even have an open rebellion. And I'm not sure if there's ever a version where it is mentioned, but the rebels, in this case, seem to want to go back to Egypt. Numbers 16, verse 1. Now Korah, son of Izhar, the son of Kohath, the son of Levi, and Dathan and Abiram, the sons of Eliab, and On, the son of Peleth, sons of Reuben, took men. And they rose up before Moses with certain of the children of Israel, 250 princes of the assembly, famous in the congregation, men of renown. And they gathered themselves together against Moses and Aaron, and said to them, Ye take too much upon you, seeing all the congregation are holy, every one of them. and the Lord is among them. Wherefore then lift ye up yourselves above the congregation of the Lord. And when Moses heard it, he fell upon his face, because by this time he is the perpetual whiner and complainer. Among his complaints is the fact that Jehovah isn't telling him a whole lot. He doesn't know what the hell's going on. And the earth opened her mouth and swallowed them up, and their houses, and all the men that appertained to Korah, and all their goods, and all that appertained to them went down alive into the pit, and the earth closed upon them, and they perished from among the congregation. Well, this was after Moses recovers a little poise, presence of mind, and says, well, now look, meet us at the gate or the door of the tabernacle tomorrow morning, and bring censers and incense and all this other stuff, and bring the whole gang with you. And then this is when good old Jehovah Yahweh kills the whole bunch of them. There's probably 250,000 people. Anyway, Numbers, let's go. Let's pick up with Numbers verse 2. And the people cried unto Moses, and when Moses prayed unto the Lord, the fire was quenched. That's because now the Lord sets a conflagration among the outer reaches of the people, and he starts killing them with fire. And the people cried unto Moses, and after the fire was quenched, and he called the name of the place Taberah, because the fire of the Lord burnt among them. Man, nice guy. And the mixed multitude that was among them fell a-lusting, and the children of Israel also wept again and said, who shall give us flesh to eat? We remember the fish that we did in Egypt freely, and the cucumbers, and the melons, and the leeks, and the onions, and the garlic. Sounds like Egypt is really the land of milk and honey. And it was. A very wealthy, a beautiful, very wealthy land, with monumental constructions, public buildings, and row houses, and temples, all gaily painted. It's a beautiful place to be. And the Lord said unto Moses, gather unto me 70 men of the elders of Israel, whom you knoweth to be the elders of the people, and officers over them, and bring them unto the tabernacle of the congregation, that they may stand there with thee. And I will come down and talk with thee there, and I will take the spirit which is upon thee, and will put it upon them, and they shall bear the burden of the people with thee, and thou bear it not thyself alone. And this is after Moses complains about, what am I going to do with all these people? I mean, they're just too much for me. And ye shall not eat 1 day, nor 2 days, nor 5 days, neither 10 days, nor 20 days, but even a whole month, until it comes out of your nostrils. Wait a minute. I skipped one. And say thou unto the people, now he's talking about the manna, that they're starting to complain about it, and I don't know if you know this, but he also furnished quails in the evening. Anyway. and say thou unto the people, sanctify yourselves against the morrow, and ye shall eat flesh. For ye have wept in the ears of the Lord, saying, who shall give us flesh to eat? For it was well with us in Egypt, therefore the Lord will give you flesh, and you shall eat. Ye shall not eat 1 day, nor 2 days, nor 5 days, neither 10 days, nor 20 days, but even a whole month, until it come out of your nostrils, and it be loathsome unto you, because ye have despised the Lord which is among you, and have wept before him, saying, why came we forth out of Egypt? And Moses said, the people among whom I am are 600,000 footmen, and thou hast said, I will give them flesh, that they may eat a whole month. And there went forth a wind from the Lord, and brought quails from the sea, and let them fall by the camp, as it were a day's journey on this side, and as it were a day's journey on the other side, around the camp, and as it were 2 cubits high upon the face of the earth. In other words, he said, you want quail? Here's quail. And the people stood up all that day and all that night and all the next day, and they gathered the quails. He that gathered the least garnered 10 homers, and they spread them all abroad for themselves round the camp. And while the flesh was yet between their teeth, ere it was chewed, the wrath of the Lord was kindled against the people, and the Lord smote the people with a very great plague. And he called the name of that place Batava, Kibroth Batava, because there they buried the people that lost it. I believe that pretty well makes the point. Now, as far as placing it in time, there is a connection here, the second connection between the biblical narrative and academic history. And we are pretty well confident with the year 1490 BC, because if you remember, the famine began in 1921 BC, and the Hebrews entered Egypt, migrated into Egypt in the year 1920 BC, and we are also told that they were there 430 years, which brings us to the date 1490 BC. And there's another explanation of when the Exodus actually took place, and this is the information that the that the Exodus took place 480 years before the construction of the temple in Jerusalem, the date for which is given as 980 BC. So now we take 980 BC, add 480, and now we come up with 1460 BC. Well, I got my trusty copy of Egypt of the Pharaohs. Looks kind of beat up. It's getting a lot of use. And I started pouring through it to find out what happened to what was going on in 1460 BC. And it turned out that, oh gosh, at that time, Tutmosis III was 9 or 10 years into his conquest of the present-day Middle East. Palestine, Canaan, Lebanon, Syria, all the way up to the Euphrates River. And he called on, he called for the erection of a stela, not to be confused with Streetcar Named Desire, that's a different stela. This is a stone monument that commemorates the conquest. Now this book here is a second printing, and it lacks a little bit of information that is found in the first printing, which I originally worked from. It was the library copy. And it tells us that this stone monument was not too far from another similar stone monument that was erected by Thutmose I when he conquered all this territory. Question: if Thutmose I conquered this territory, then why did Thutmose III have to do it all over again? Well, this brings to our attention the one party who is now significant by his absence, and that is Thutmose II. And aside from putting down a rebellion in Nubia, because every time the double crown landed on somebody else's head, the Nubians revolted. And maybe you can imagine a messenger running into Pharaoh's throne room and saying, "The Nubians are revolting! The Nubians are revolting!" And then the Pharaoh says, well, perhaps a little uncouth, but I don't think I'd go that far. No, they're really revolting. So they send armies down there and they settle it all. Because Nubia, or Kush, vile Kush as they call it, was the source of all their gold. Well, anyway, after this, we don't hear very much about Thutmose II. There's something about a campaign in Palestine where some prisoners were taken. But outside of that, not very much. And there's a reason for this, and we can understand this from the nature of the Egyptian people themselves. They were happy most of the time when things were stable and there was a strong government and there was prosperity and good times. Maybe they had abundant trade, maybe they had warded off an invader or won a war. And at these times, wow, they would cover the walls with hieroglyphs, bas-reliefs, paintings, and all kinds of stuff, bragging about how good things are. But then we don't hear too much about the two periods of chaos, of social unrest and upheaval, and civil wars that are known as the first and second intermediate period. Also, I noticed that science in general and Egyptology along with it is no longer content to just relay information. Now they have to dramatize it, so it's less given to responsible research and more to show business. One example of this is Queen Hatshepsut. Remember her? Oh. Well, she was Thutmose II's widow. But we hear about how she rose to power from relative anonymity and ruled Egypt in some really spectacular fashion, and then suddenly vanished from the pages of history. Well, this is nothing but a whole bunch of hype. It's not at all true, and it's about as true as my 1,000 head of unicorns. Anyway, the key to understanding here, and it's important to broaden your mind and your outlook and to continually reach out of the box to get the vital information you need for full understanding. Now, this point of understanding revolves around the fact that Hatshepsut was not the first female ruler of Egypt. There were two others. One was the last ruler of the 6th dynasty, and this is called the Old Kingdom. And she was the last ruler of indeterminate length. I don't know how long she was actually on the throne. Some guesses like 12 years, but Sir Gardner just puts a question mark there, so there's not too much reliable information. But her name was Nitocris, and she was supposed to be a very beautiful woman, and while she was on the throne, there was some people that were plotting against her, and they wanted to overthrow the government. And she found out about it, and so not letting on that she was wise to them, she invited them over for a big feast, big banquet, and this was in a big room. But the room seems to have been, it's kind of underground, and because she has the guests all comfortably seated, and then she bars the doors so that they're secure and nobody can get out. And then she causes the river Nile, waters from the river Nile, to flood the room and drown all these bastards. Anyway, her reign marks the collapse of the 6th dynasty and leads directly into the first intermediate period, which is a period of great turmoil, violent anarchy, civil wars, and general chaos. Now this lasts for about 200 years until Amenemhet I in 1990 or 1991 BC seizes power and becomes the first pharaoh of the 12th dynasty. And we'll talk about him a little bit later. Well, what he does is he restores all the lands, the nomes, the city-states of Egypt to their original borders where they might have lost lands in war with another nome. And he makes sure everybody's got enough oxen to pull their plows and seed to plant and all that. So it's a total reorganization, and it kind of puts us in mind of the Domesday Book, which came out in 1080 in Great Britain, 14 years after the Norman Conquest. And what it was just an inventory of the whole land. Well, let me see if I get the date right, because here we are. And Sebenkneferu, or Sebekare, well anyway, she was, and Meretri, well, she was the queen the last female ruler of the 12th dynasty. And she ruled for 3 years, 1789 to 1786, whereupon the 12th dynasty collapsed. And a second intermediate period, which was a rerun of the first one, except this one had the added feature of the Hyksos conquest of Egypt. And so that it wasn't until Pharaoh Amosa, one of the two brothers who started the War of Reclamation, became the first pharaoh and the founder of the 18th dynasty. So from Nitocris and Sebek-Nefru, the Old Kingdom and the 12th dynasty, it's a fair surmise to propose that things were pretty well out of hand by that time, and that's why these two dynasties collapsed. So what can Hatshepsut, or Hatshepsut's ascendant to the throne, what could that mean? That the country was in trouble. And a sure sign of that, one of the actually 3 or 4 indicators that there was something very, very wrong, and this was the disregard or the disgrace in which her late husband, Thutmose II, was held. Because, as I said, beginning on page 180 and down to somewhere around 181, read both pages if you get the book. Anyway, the bishop, the minister of by the name of Eneni, he's about 80 years old, and he had served under 4 pharaohs. He gives an elegy, like a funerary speech when upon the death of Thutmose II, and he says as follows: having ascended into heaven, he became united with the gods, and his son, being arisen in his place as king of the 2 lands, that's Thutmose III now, ruled upon the throne of his begetter, while his sister, the god's wife Hatshepsut, governed the land, and the 2 lands were under her control. People worked for her. In Egypt, bowed the head. Well, the question is, all right, and we get this business about, well, they don't know very much about what Thutmose II was all about. Of course, he ruled for 20 years, 510 to 1490. And now here we go. And this is when his remains are found. An almost undecorated tomb at Biblad el Moloch, containing an uninscribed sarcophagus so closely resembles that of Thutmose I that it is confidently ascribed to his son, and from its neglect one might conjure that no one cared very much what was his fate. His funerary temple, discovered by the French in 1926, is a paltry affair. Well, we have to ask, what could a pharaoh of Egypt have done to be held in such disgrace? Well, the answer, as the question is posed, is why nothing. I mean, what could there be? But on the other hand, if the Pharaoh goes up against a rival lord from the desert, and they engage in an ass-kicking contest, and the Pharaoh of Egypt comes in a poor second, that might just do it. And it does bring to mind in the 70s of our era, the ruler of the Soviet Union, the premier, Nikita Khrushchev. And one of the things that we are really mindful of and really think is pretty extraordinary is Mr. Khrushchev's anti-Stalinist effort, campaign. Because communism really isn't so bad. It's a form of socialism, the poorest form of socialism, because it's top-down. When the true nature of socialism is anarcho-socialism, and this is a decentralized, sort of a tribal thing that, well, it has to do with, people just kind of taking care of their own localities and not having a strong central government, maybe a highway department, and maybe a court system based on common law. But outside of that, well, anyway, it wasn't communism that was so reviled, but Stalinism. And the truth is coming out that maybe Hitler didn't kill as many people as people think. And the 6 million has turned out to be a fraud. Of course, if you say so in Germany, you can still go to jail. Whatever happened to free speech? What's happening to free speech? Anyway. Here we have Hitler with carrying the albatross of 6 million Jews, which is turning out that that's a complete lie. But here's Joe Stalin, or Uncle Joe. And actually, the true winners of World War II were the Soviet Union, because they gobbled up all of Eastern Europe. But our Uncle Joe, who was our ally, he killed 20 million of his own people. And he has a quote that I think is real cool. He said, "Kill one person and it's murder. Kill 1 million people and it's a statistic." Well, I think that the fate of good old Tutmosis II was the same as Khrushchev and Stalin. Let's try to forget that this guy ever was. So anyway, just to wrap things up, and one of the reasons I'm segmenting this presentation, there's so much material, and I'd like to minimize the narcotic effect of an overlong narrative. So anyway, that looks like a good reason. Like, what could a Pharaoh have done? But if he led the host of Egypt to the disaster at the Red Sea, where it wasn't really at the Red Sea, but it was a disaster nonetheless, well, that had been reason enough. And another is the fact that the Hebrews suddenly removed from Egypt after being there a total of 430 years in a land of milk and honey. They wanted to be there. And as I read from the scripture, they loudly protested being dragged out into the wilderness. There is another incident at the library where I'm there walking around, not sure why I'm there or having the foggiest idea why I'm there, and my hand reaches out and pulls a thin maroon hardcover volume, and I look at the title and it says Atlantis. Well, I don't know about Atlantis, and it's all just guesswork, speculation, and nobody really knows anything. But then I thought, well, the impulse to come here and the intuition is so strong that I'll take this book home and read it, even though I don't want to. And there it comes. When I do read it, I find out what really happened at the Red Sea. Or not at the Red Sea. So that is it for now, and some of the more humorous aspects of the Bible, which I'll bring up from time to time, is exemplified by the one that Cecil B. DeMille created on the giant silver screen, and that is, the Bible tells us that God caused a stiff east wind to blow the walls of water apart, to divide the Red Sea so that the people could cross on dry land. Well, the laws of nature being what they are, don't you think it's such an impossibly powerful wind, enough to hold the waters of the Red Sea apart, wouldn't blow the Egyptians, the Hebrews into outer space? It's kind of funny. Imagine Indians in the North American continent looking around and all these people come flying out of the air. Where do you come from? Well, last thing we knew, we were trying to cross the Red Sea, but then all hell broke loose. Anyway, thank you for stopping by. Be on the lookout for part 11.1, where we will continue this adventure and reveal some more surprises. Like, you really don't know why the Exodus even took place. But anyway, thank you for stopping by. Bless you and keep you until next time. And by all means, have the best day ever. So until then, so long, and take care of yourself. Bye.